Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you today. Theo Fleury is one of the first hockey players I ever idolized when I was 5 years old. In 1988, he came here to Salt Lake City to play for my beloved Golden Eagles. Even though he helped the Eagles to an IHL championship that year, he wouldn't stay long. After averaging nearly 2 points a game in the following season, he was called up to the NHL in 1989, helping the Calgary Flames win its first ever Stanley Cup. He played in the NHL for over a decade as a 7-time All-Star and set several scoring records. In 2002, he came back here to Salt Lake City and became a gold medalist as Canada beat the United States, winning their first gold medal in 50 years, which I think is still a little too soon. I really don't even want to talk about that. Too soon. After retirement, he overcame an insane history of sexual abuse and addiction, which he has publicly addressed. He's launched several businesses and charities, wrote a best-selling autobiography, hosts an amazing podcast, has even written some great music, and was gracious enough to spend some time with us this morning. Theo Fleury, it's an absolute honor to welcome you to the show.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. You know, that time in Salt Lake is forever etched in my memory for sure. You know, it was such a great place to play. The fans were incredible, and we had a lot of fun in Salt Lake.
Wow. My dad was a sportscaster, so I was exposed to a lot of different sports, and for whatever reason, I loved hockey. Going to the Salt Palace, I can smell it to this day.
Yeah.
And and watching the Eagles. I mean, and I remember you at a very young age, how dynamic you were. And I love following you. I would listen to you guys on AM radio. If people gave me Legos, I would put them in a pile and play blue bricks versus red bricks. And the blue bricks was like Peoria or some shit.
Yeah.
Like, I just loved it.
That's awesome.
And
that's awesome.
The Eagles, the Salt Lake Golden Eagles have not been a team here since like 1993. Like it's been almost 3 decades, but there's beer league teams that are called the Golden Eagles, and we see the logo everywhere. And there's this like really obscure kind of Facebook page with a bunch of Golden Eagles fans. And a few days ago, I put out a little message. You know, not a lot of people talk on that page, but I put out a little message saying, I'm going to interview Theo, and posted one of your pictures. And I'm just going to take a minute here and just read some of the things that people said. And just understand, this is like a few of the many comments and likes and shares and stuff that we got. Theo is a wonderful human being who goes out of his way to help others and makes the world a better place. I really miss the days of Salt Lake Golden Eagles and when Theo played there. There's one. His heart was as big as his fighting punches. I adore Theo. He was one awesome example to our family. Tell him his Golden Eagles PR guy, Mark Kelly, said hello and thanks for the memories.
That's awesome. Wow. Here's a blast from the past.
Yeah, right? I attended 95% of all Golden Eagles games in the 70s and 80s. I saw lots of great players, but I never saw one as exciting as Theo. One of the best in-your-face players I ever watched. Opponents upped their penalty time playing against him. He could have aggravated Mother Teresa.
Nice.
Last one here. One of the most giving players in the game. He's using his platform to help others. During his short time in Salt Lake City, he lived with me at my home in Sandy, where we shared many a late night, early morning, munching on scone cutter. Both of us transplanted Canadians. We were amazing by the fry sauce. That was Brian.
Brian Patafi. Yeah.
You made a mark, my friend.
Yeah. Well, it was like I said, I arrived in Salt Lake right before the playoffs, right before we went on that playoff run where we won the Turner Cup. And I could only play 10 games total while I was there. Otherwise, the first year of my contract that I had signed in the wintertime would kick in. And, the first game I had, I had 5 points, 3 goals and 2 assists in my first game. So, if you want to get the fan base behind you, you do stuff like that, they'll, they'll fall in love with you right away. So, wow. That team we had down there was a great mixture of some old grizzled veterans and then a bunch of us young guys. And so, I don't know if if you remember a guy named Rick Hayward.
Of course.
I before COVID hit, I actually got to spend a few days with him in Ontario. So it was, and we talked about the old Salt Lake City days and how much fun we had, and it was a great place to play. Unbelievable, like the city and the mountains, and we all sort of lived out in Sandy, Utah, there in an apartment complex, and we used to have fun driving to the rink every morning for practice, and it was a really close team. We really enjoyed playing together, and like I said, we had tons of fun, and it was the old green parrot. Is that still around?
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm in a part of the valley. It's a snowstorm right now, but I'm in a part of the valley that I could just like walk 30 seconds from my house and look over into Sandy.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. So it was, all around amazing experience. And I think it was one of the best places, to play in the league at that time, for sure. So.
Wow. Well, you almost didn't get drafted. I mean, you were 5'6". You were clearly very successful as a young hockey player, but you almost didn't get drafted because of your size.
Yeah. There was 415 guys picked ahead of me in the draft, because the first year I was eligible, I didn't get drafted. So there's 12 rounds there. And then the second year, I didn't get picked until the 8th round. And so 412 guys got picked before me. And I believe that I sit today 61st in all-time scoring in the NHL. So, I always tell kids, it's not the number where you get picked, it's where you finish, right? Wow. So, and, obviously I wanted an opportunity. I didn't care where. And, obviously Calgary gave me that opportunity. And the reason why they drafted me was first Salt Lake. They thought I'd put some butts in the stands, and, people would enjoy watching me play. But, little did they know that I had a bigger plan and a bigger agenda. And so, after sort of lighting it up the first half of the season, I got called up on New Year's Eve of 1988.
That's
and
right.
And unfortunately, I didn't go back to Salt Lake. And 6 months later, we were carrying the Stanley Cup around the Montreal Forum. So,
oh my God, so cool. There's an interview of you that I found when you were in Salt Lake, and it was during your tear during that second season when you were allowed to play pretty much every game. And one thing that you said in that interview I loved, which is that big players have to prove that they can't play, but small players have to prove that they can. I thought that was really good and a great kind of summary of your work ethic and your career. And in that same interview, I'm not sure who it was. There's no like captions, but somebody is talking about you scoring 11 points in 2 games. And they
it was Paul Baxter.
Is that who it was? I wondered.
Yeah, that was Paul Baxter.
Funny.
Yeah.
He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. He was like, I'd never seen that before. I don't know. That was insane.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we had such an awesome team. Like, our power play was like almost automatic. Like if you took a penalty against us, we were scoring on it. So, but yeah, I remember guys like Peter Lappin and Paul Ranheim was down there.
Yep.
Rich Chernamaz, Randy Busick, Martin Samard, Mark Bureau. Like we had a lot of guys that ended up playing some games in the NHL. So it was like I said, it was an awesome experience. And,
wow.
and I have lots of fond memories of my time in Salt Lake, even though it was, very short, but, and then, going back there in 2002, was, I was like, holy cow, my whole entire hockey career has come full circle here, because this is where I sort of started, and this is where it's going to end, so
Wow.
it was awesome.
That's amazing. I want to talk as painful. It's like talking about the Jazz Bulls final in like 98. Like it's still like way too soon. I don't want to talk about, we'll talk about the Olympics in a second. As painful as it is, what the cup, dude, the lightest 35 pounds you ever put over your head. I mean, what was that like?
As a kid growing up in Canada, every kid who plays hockey dreams about playing in the NHL first and foremost. And then when you get to the NHL, you dream about winning Stanley Cups. And so, I was able to accomplish that in, my first year in the NHL. And so, what a thrill. Not only did we have a great minor league team, but we had an incredible NHL team too. And so, the management, the coaches, the owners who sort of put this group together, the minor league team and then the NHL team, they did a great job of not only drafting good hockey players, but, there was lots of really great people in both organizations. And, having Paul Baxter and Bobby Francis as our coaches and, just that whole vibe of Salt Lake, like we were really close and, they had the host families and, it was a really tight knit community of people in Salt Lake. And so I really loved that part of it, almost more than the playing part was, how hockey crazy they were in Salt Lake and the fans just, they loved to see us. They loved to hang out with us. And we had a blast down there, and obviously for winning the Turner Cup, and then the following year, those guys made it to the final, I believe, the second year, and then we were in the Stanley Cup final, that year as well. So, there was lots of great hockey players in the organization, but I think more importantly, there was lots of good people, and I think. The reflection of who we were as athletes was, a direct reflection of the fans and the support of the people in Salt Lake.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we love our sports teams here. I mean, we love the Jazz. We love Real Salt Lake. We loved the Golden Eagles, man. It's such a passion. During your NHL career, and before, you knew how to score. You could definitely dangle, but please tell the audience, what is a celly? And you had some amazing top 10 cellies in your career. Explain to the audience what a celly is.
I was a guy that loved to score goals, right? And, the particular celebration or celly that you're talking about, happened in 1991 against the Edmonton Oilers in probably one of the greatest playoff series ever played in the history of the game. And we needed to win game 6. We were down 3-2 in that series, and we had to win or we're headed to the golf course. And I scored the game-winning goal in overtime in game 6 so that we could get to game 7. And I didn't plan it. It just sort of happened. And now it's like one of the most watched celebrations on YouTube. So
good. Sliding on your knees, arms like unrolling windows. And the call was so good. Like the classic.
Yeah.
Classic.
That's awesome. It was awesome.
So I've seen you in Salt Lake, playing in the IHL. I've seen you in the NHL. I watched you probably either 91, 92 in Los Angeles playing the Kings. It was a game that Gretz wasn't there, unfortunately. And I did also watch you play in Salt Lake City. I was fortunate enough to have tickets to Salt Lake City, Czech Republic, where we played Jaromir and Hasek and all those guys.
That was a great game.
Oh man, it was a great game. I loved it in the E-Center back in the time.
Yeah.
I've heard you describe what this was like, but tell me what it was like when you first walked into the locker room in Salt Lake City.
Well, I was sort of a fanboy, obviously when you're a part of, Canada's national team at any level, it's a huge thrill knowing that, for a couple of weeks, you're going to put the Canadian flag on your chest and go out and represent, the amazing people of Canada. But when I walked in the dressing room, you sort of look, where am I going to be sitting? And so I spotted my jersey, and then I looked to the left and I saw Sakic 91. And then I looked to the right and I saw Lemieux 66. And so, to sit in between Mario and Joe Sakic at the Olympics, just enhanced, my experience to be there. And like I said, I sort of became a fanboy for a few minutes, just sort of realizing, I guess, the magnitude with which in the journey we were about to, go on. And that whole experience was just magical. And, we didn't get off to the greatest start in the tournament, but what happened was we just kept getting better and better. And then finally, when we got to the medal round, we were in full control, and, we showed it. And, it was, well, to this day, one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Wow. to be a part of that team.
That roster was ridiculous.
It was just insane. The fact that we hadn't won a gold medal in 50 years. That's and right. We claim that hockey is our sport, I think was, just sort of added to, everything that happened during those 2 weeks.
So cool. One of my biggest regrets in life, I was a senior in high school. I had the worst job. To this day, I don't know why I took this job. I was working at Eddie Bauer in the mall, and I was scheduled that Sunday. I had to work from noon until 6, and the game was at like 2 p.m. on Sunday, the day of the closing ceremonies. And one of the biggest regrets in my life, I thought about it, and I went to work. And I so to this day wish I would have called in sick and got fired or whatever to see that game, because I missed it. I could only watch it later, but man, I wish I would have been able to watch it. What a cool experience. What an amazing experience.
It was unbelievable. And, so cool. At that time, our biggest rival was the US, because they had beaten us in the 96 World Cup of Hockey. And so, we were looking for a little bit of revenge, against them, and they had an unbelievable team too. You look at their roster, Brad Hall and Jeremy Roenick and Chelios, Richter, all those guys. It was a perfect matchup, the perfect time. And, we beat them in their own backyard. So, love that.
That's part my backyard.
Well. Yeah, exactly.
Damn it. In your career, when you look back, especially with baseball, it seems like there's, with a batter, there's a pitcher that the batter has this dude's number and he just can smoke him every time. And there's another pitcher who, like, for the life of you, you cannot hit. Who could you always score on, and who could you never score on?
Well, playing in the old Smythe division, there was Kurt McLean, there was Grant Fuhr in Edmonton, who was Bob Essenza in Winnipeg, Patrick Waugh in Colorado. And so, Kelly Rudy in LA, Arthur Zerbe in San Jose. So, I didn't have trouble scoring on those guys. Scored a lot of goals on those guys. I don't know who I've scored the most goals against. I haven't really looked at that. But when I moved out east and played for the Rangers, we ran into Dominic Hasek, a few times, and I always had trouble scoring on that guy. And was towards the end of my time in New York where I finally got one past him. So, but he was one of the hardest guys. For some reason, he could read me very, very well. And so, But I always say that Dominic Hasek was the best road hockey goalie in the NHL because he didn't really have a style, but he was really good at anticipating, and he never gave up on a rebound or nothing. And so I think that's what really made him, really great.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what looked like an apparent lack of style, he knew how to stop the puck, get it out of there.
Yeah. He broke our hearts in Nagano. We ended up going to a shootout against the Czechs in '98, and he stopped all 5 of our guys.
In the semifinal, right?
The semifinal, yeah.
Oh,
so
crazy. And that was the first year that they allowed pros in the Olympics. And so that was basically like the dream team for Canada.
That was the first dream team in Canada. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. My buddy had a poster of you from when you played in the Rangers. I still remember it in his bedroom. And that was pretty much where your career was coming to an end. You had some issues in the NHL, and it came from a really tough environment growing up. Would you like to kind of talk about what your childhood was like and the chaos that you went through?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So both my parents, had addiction issues in their life. And so I grew up in a really kind of chaotic, violent, kind of crazy home, a lot of insanity. And then as a phenom hockey player, I ran into this coach and scout who basically promised me a one-way ticket to the NHL. And over a 2.5-year period, he raped me 150 times over a 2-year period. And so what I was left with was, a lot of emotional pain and scars from those 2 experiences. And wasn't too long after that, I discovered, alcohol as a coping mechanism to sort of suppress and numb out from those 2 experiences. And then, towards the end of my career in New York, everybody thinks that, my career ended because of addiction issues. And that's not the case. Addiction was, my medicine to sort of help me deal with, depression and anxiety, panic attacks, that kind of stuff. And so at the end of my career, I could no longer manage, my mental health. And, 20 years ago, nobody was talking about, mental illness in our sport, especially. And, and so I just sort of did the best that I could. And I did, I did the best I could with what I had. And at that time it was addiction. But, 2003, I left the game and started down this path of, of healing. And, I've now been sober for over 15 years and now I help other people who've had similar experiences such as myself. I help them get on a path of healing through, my speaking engagements or my workshops or, my private Facebook group as well. So, I've taken all those negative experiences that I had as a child and turned them into something positive. And writing the first book, really changed my life because when I left the game, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan for the rest of my life. I thought I was just going to be this hockey player and sort of just fade off into the sunset. But, writing Playing with Fire in 2009 really significantly changed my life and changed my perspective and, really sort of stepped into my true purpose in life. And that was to be a healer and, to be a voice for people who had not found their voice yet. And so, 12 and a half years later, 800 speeches I've done in the last, 12 and a half years. And so, this part of my life has been way more rewarding than the first half. And I think that's what's really important. And that's what really matters.
So much of that I really want to unpack I was one of the ones who thought, okay, he had addiction problems. That's what took him out of the game. You hadn't even hit your rock bottom yet at that time. There was still a
No.
lot of processing and healing that you needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I really want to, it's so interesting to hear your story, which I was not that familiar with, to hear your story, to hear what you did to overcome all of the odds against you, but you didn't choose to ride off into the sunset. Like you said, you're using this platform for good to help other people. And that's so incredible and amazing. I think it would be so easy to say like, yep, I beat addiction. That was great. Now I'm just going to go live my life and enjoy things. But you are speaking out and making this a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, if you think about COVID right now, and, we've had more opioid deaths and suicides than we've actually had COVID deaths. And so, when I started out on this journey, I was just a survivor of sexual abuse. Okay. And, I became the poster boy for sexual abuse, and I didn't want that. I didn't want that moniker, so to speak. But at the beginning, it was unbelievable how many people were coming up to me or sending me emails or sending me direct messages on social media saying, hey, man, I read your book. You told my story, me too, right? And I realized right then and there, but that by me finding my own voice and putting a voice to my pain and suffering, that I could help other people do the exact same thing. And I was getting inundated every day, like sometimes, 50 emails a day, or 20 people were coming up to me at events or book signings and saying, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse myself. And so I was sort of pushed into that role because I had no expectations, right? I had no idea that the book was going to have the impact that it did. And and then I started getting an education around, what was going on and how trauma, impacts mental health, and then how mental health impacts addiction. And so, trauma, mental health, and addiction aren't separate entities. They actually all live in the same space, and they all live in the same house. And so, when I switched from, sexual abuse, because I didn't want to use that word sexual, because when you use that word, a lot of people, dive under tables and, bury their heads in the floor or try to sweep this stuff under the rug. And when I switched and just called it trauma in general, I started to have a bigger impact. And, a lot more people were listening to me. And so, when we switched from sexual abuse to trauma, then we brought in everybody into the conversation because, in my experience, we've all experienced trauma in our lives. And I believe that trauma is the string, which sort of binds us together all as human beings. And COVID-19 is the most traumatic experience that's happened since World War II. And so everybody's dealing with their own stuff right now, isolation, and, what we're seeing is an accumulation of trauma. And so why are suicides and addiction levels going up? Because, it's a coping, especially addictions is a coping mechanism to suppress or either numb out from these negative feelings.
Mm. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that you use the word trauma, which I think of as like a big change in a short amount of time, and so all those things that you mentioned are definitely forms of trauma. And you do open up the conversation to many, many different people, especially on the platform of your podcast. I mean, you've recently talked to Bill Burr, which is amazing. He's awesome.
He's a great dude.
He's great. But you've talked to all kinds of people about all kinds of different topics and different trauma. I mean, even up to like sex trafficking, so I do appreciate that. How has that platform been for you to be able to share your message?
It's been incredible. Like I said, well, when I sat down to write the book, I wasn't going to talk about any of this stuff. And, thank God the lady that I wrote the book with got all that stuff out of me, because, what's happened is it's significantly changed my life and put me in this space. And not only that, I've been able to hang around with some of the, the most intelligent experts in this field, and I've been able to learn from them and create this amazing platform for healing and forward movement and advocacy and activism, all those things. And so, podcasts have become incredibly popular, and I do probably 5 different podcasts every week, and it gives me the opportunity to talk about these things that not everybody wants to talk about, and I talk about them in a different sort of way that helps people understand their own issues and their own traumatic experiences, and that it's not necessarily a burden, but it's it's an opportunity for them to heal and move out of that space of victim into a space of being a victor over whatever happened to them.
Can you tell us a little bit about the role of spirituality in your life now?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest piece, right? Healing is a 3-step process. It's emotional, it's physical, and it's spiritual. About 5 years into my own sobriety, I hit a wall, and I wasn't drinking, but I should have been, and I'd started speaking on a lot of Indigenous communities in Canada. And what happened was, I started hanging around with elders and medicine men and spiritual healers and spiritual teachers, and they started to teach me about spirituality. And so when I sort of grasped onto that concept, that's when my life went to the next sort of level of, clarity and healing. And so, I hang out with one of the most powerful medicine men in the world who lives a couple hours south of Calgary here. And, I've got to spend a lot of really quality time with him and his incredible family. And, he has taught me about spirituality and how important it is and how you need to stay connected, every single day. And, my biggest fear was of being alone. And so through all the teachings and through, staying connected spiritually, I'm no longer afraid of that. I actually, do enjoy spending time alone. I do enjoy just being with myself. And that was never the case. I spent, the first 36 years of my life sort of running away from my trauma and sort of living in the past. And, today that's completely different. I try to live in the moment as much as possible. And I think when you try to do that, there's a lot less suffering. There's a lot less, conflict in life, and, your relationships obviously get better when you're living in that space. And so, that's what I've been taught, by my people, because I'm an Aboriginal person myself. And so, it really connected with me. But, I always tell people, whether it's God, Allah, Buddha, Jehovah, a tree in your backyard, whatever it is, believing that something greater than yourself can help you heal is, like I said, was the big turning point in my own personal recovery. And, I think today I have 5,613 days of continuous sobriety. And, I never thought that would ever be possible, but, it's one day at a time and trying to live in the moment as much as possible.
That's so beautifully said. If we look at your story, there's a lot of finger pointing that we can do. There's a lot of people that we can place blame on, and we can talk about them in a certain way. To explain the role of forgiveness in your life, and have you forgiven the people that have caused you harm in your life?
Yeah, I think the biggest, the biggest person I had to forgive was myself, right? Somehow or a lot of people take responsibility for what happened to them. And, I was a kid, when all this stuff was going on, and, what could I have really done to make it any different? And, one of my favorite movie scenes is in Good Will Hunting. At the end of the movie, when Robin Williams and Matt Damon sort of have that final scene where, Will is still angry, still resentful, still beating the shit out of himself for what happened to him. And, all it took was Robin Williams saying, repeatedly, wasn't your fault, wasn't your fault, wasn't your fault, wasn't your fault. And then finally we see Will, who's a very angry individual, very resentful. He starts to cry for the first time in his life. And, he gets out all of that rage and all of that anger and all of that abuse and all of that stuff. And the next scene, what happens, Ben Affleck goes to pick him up at his house and he's not there. And that was Ben's wish for him, and he goes and gets the job. And then ultimately he goes and, goes after the girl who loves him deeply. And he's finally in a place where he can accept, that he is a good person and that he is worthy of, love and people caring for him and caring about him. And so, it's such a powerful scene in that movie. And to me, I believe that Matt or Will finally forgave himself for what happened. And, I was a really angry guy, right? If anybody watched me play hockey, there was a lot of anger behind what I was doing. And, for many years, anger did, serve a purpose and ultimately saved my life in a lot of situations. And, but, in this new place that I live in, I don't need anger anymore. And so I had to get rid of that anger. And how do you do that? Well, you got to tap into the sadness part. And, I was so afraid of crying because I thought if I started, I would never stop because that's how much anger I had in me. But, that process of sadness was where I needed to go in order to get to the next level of healing. And so, that piece right there was, hugely, I work in the prison systems now in Canada too. I work with a lot of inmates, and, the two greatest lessons they've taught me is the first lesson was compassion, that everybody has a story that has some sort of trauma connected to it. And, like I maybe have 15 layers of trauma in my story, but these guys in the prison system, they have 50, 60, 70 layers of trauma in their story. And so, I know why they end up in prison, because they just can't manage their anger and resentment to the world for what happened to them. And so, compassion is number one. And if you don't have compassion, I can't work in this space that I'm in if I don't have compassion. And then secondly, they taught me about forgiveness, is that, they're not bad people. They just had really bad things happen to them. And I see myself in a lot of those guys, and moving forward, I needed to forgive myself, and I didn't know how to do that. And by putting myself out there to visit these prisons, these guys taught me those two incredible, valuable lessons that I'll never forget.
That's so cool. I've seen you talk about some of these issues recently, on YouTube, whatever, and you can really see something shining through with you. It's not it's not superficial. It's deep and profound, and you can see that the kindness behind your eyes and the compassion and all these things that you've gone through. You can tell that they have really made a difference. This is going to be a 2-part question. What advice would you give to somebody who is wanting to become really great at their sport or their endeavor? And the second part is, what would you tell somebody who has been suffering with trauma, with mental, mental trauma?
Yeah. Well, I always have this saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Right. And so hard work has always been, a hallmark of, Theo Fleury. And, I've never given up. So there's a certain amount of determination to want to succeed. That was instilled in me, early on in my life. But, for me, it's about respecting people. It's about love, and it's about caring for people. And, when you step out of line, there are consequences that you have to face. And so I believe that we're all responsible for our choices and our actions and our decisions. And, like I said, when you step outside the lines, you may have to face consequences for some of those decisions. And, in my life, those have been the 4 things that sort of stand out as hard work, respect, love and caring, and consequences. And, I've sort of lived my life that way. And then those of us who've experienced trauma and are still trying to find our voice, I think it's about finding, safe people to sort of talk about our trauma. Because, in the real world, we haven't created a space for trauma. And because we haven't created a space for trauma, now we're seeing, the highest suicide rates and, the most addictive people who are struggling, right? And it's because we haven't allowed people to express, these traumatic events that have happened to them. And so, that's part of this thing we call stigma. Is as an advocate and an activist on a daily basis, I face stigma all the time that, you're not allowed to talk about this stuff, or, I don't want to hear this, or, this didn't happen to me, or whatever it is, whatever phrase. And all it does is it keeps people silent, and human nature, we weren't put on this earth to suffer in silence. We were put on this earth to be in relationship with each other and help each other get through the most difficult times. But, because the whole entire planet is traumatized, and we don't really feel safe, it's hard for people to, to find their voice. But in my experience, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And the one thing that I hadn't tried yet was honesty. And, when I told my story, I didn't care anymore, because I knew I was going to die, and I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. And, by being honest and open in the book that I wrote, I connected to a whole group of people who had the same experience as I did. And I was sort of coming out the other side, and people wanted to know, how I did that. And so that opened up a bigger conversation that needed to happen.
Well, we're just going to put this here. If you or anybody that is needing help, is experiencing trauma and needs to talk to somebody, there is help out there. You can text HOME to 741-741. You can call 1-800-273-TALK. You can also visit makeitokay.org, where you can find a bunch of resources, which is just so important in this day and age. And if you're struggling, or somebody is struggling, please get help. Please reach out. Theo, I want to close this out by just reading you something. I'm sure you'll recognize it. Let me just read it here. I now have the life I've always dreamed of. My head is held high. I like looking people in the eye. My past will always be a part of me, but the truth stands. I am who I am. I stand for what I believe. You win from up here. I am real, I am me, and I am free.
That's one of my songs, or a couple of my songs sort of put together. So, yeah. I grew up around music. Music has sort of always been good for my soul. And so after I wrote the book, I was like, geez, if I can write a book, maybe I can write music, maybe I can write songs. And so I had a couple friends in the music industry who were musicians, producers, writers, and I got together with these two amazing guys, and we started writing music together, and then 6 years later, we turned all of these songs into an album, and now I get to perform these songs live in front of audiences, which is incredibly amazing and cathartic, and all these awesome things. So it's been I've been in the entertainment business my whole entire life, right? As a hockey player, you're an entertainer. People buy tickets to come and watch you play. And, same with speaking. Speaking's the same thing. Music is the same thing. And so, what I've always sort of tried to do post-career is keep myself in sort of the entertainment business, doing documentaries, that kind of stuff. Ultimately it's all entertainment, but, the message is always, the same, is that, like you said, if you've had this experience, there's definitely a way out, and there's a path to healing if you're, willing to do the work. And if you're willing to do the work, then I can help you get to where you want to go.
That's fantastic. Theo, we're so grateful for you. I personally, on behalf of Salt Lake, we're grateful for you and your career. We're grateful that you came here and you played your ass off. We're grateful for all the work that you've done after that, and all the people that you've helped and everything that you've shared. We're so grateful for the time you took to be on our show today. Where do you want to go? Where do you want people to go to find resources or to connect with you?
Yeah, just go to my website. TheoFleury.life is my website. I'm on all social media platforms. So, if you need somebody to talk to, I'm always on my phone. I'm always checking my phone, make sure that, if somebody's desperate out there, somebody's, suicidal, I make sure that I jump on it as quickly as possible. But mostly I want to say that to all the people of Salt Lake, you guys were a huge part of my journey, and, thank you for caring about me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for, coming to the games and all that stuff. And, I met some awesome people there, and, thank you for being part of my journey, because, like I said, I came to Salt Lake with nobody in the Flames organization believing that I could be a full-time NHL player, and without having the experience in Salt Lake and in front of those amazing fans and amazing people that I met, man, I just want everybody to know that you guys have been a huge part of, my success and my journey. And I have lots of amazing memories of my time, even though it was short. In Salt Lake, you definitely have a place in my heart, and will always have a place in my heart.
I'm pretty sure you'll always have a place here, and I don't think you'll ever pay for a meal here ever again. Theo Fleury, thank you so much for appearing on the show. It's been very meaningful, and we're really grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Casey. Thank you for reaching out and asking me to come on.
It's been my pleasure. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.